Everyone, this is Biz Gormley at EPIP HQ and Emily Kessler.
Hello.
And we're excited to be doing the webinar today on designing a great session for the national conference. I am particularly excited that Emily is joining us because she has lots of experience both with designing sessions but also with the EPIP conference. This will be my first EPIP conference, but we have done a lot of work already, so we're excited to share that with you today. For anyone who's new to EPIP on the call, we wanted to just first kind of lead in with some housekeeping and an overview of who we are. Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy, or EPIP, is a national network of foundation professionals, social entrepreneurs, and other change makers who strive for excellence in the practice of philanthropy. And we provide a platform for our community to connect with each other, to learn leadership skills, and to inspire emerging ideas in the social sector. And all of these concepts really tie together in the annual conference. It's kind of the culmination of all this activity. Our mission is to develop emerging leaders committed to building a just, equitable, and sustainable society. And I am here if any of this is confusing or you want to talk more or dig into what we mean by any of the kind of keywords or about what we do. I'd love to talk to you about membership or EPIP in general. And you can contact me at biz@epip.org. I am also going to be leading a webinar next week as part of our regular Wednesday webinar series. We want to let you know what's coming up down the line. I'll be with Matthias Jacobson, who is going to be leading the webinar on climbing the career mountain with well-designed side projects. So if you have passions on projects on the side or want to think about how to get ahead towards your goals, no matter what you're doing in your day job, this is a great place to both think about how and what you can do in that category. You can register for the webinar at epip.org/events or /events. Check out the website in general for all of our upcoming events. The conference info is on there as well, and you can see more webinars down the line as well as the local chapter events that will be happening soon. For today's webinar, we are going to be using the question box to communicate with you guys. So if you have any technical difficulties, comments, questions, just go ahead and type them into that question box. We'll do our best to help you troubleshoot anything that comes up, and if there are larger questions that will be best kind of raised with the whole group, we will save them for the Q&A. The polls and the questions that we do today are anonymous. So no one will know your name when you write in a question. If you want to follow us on social media, EPIP webinar is a great hashtag to use to link all of our posts together. We are recording this webinar because a lot of folks in our membership, in our community, are interested in learning more about doing a session but weren't able to join. So we are going to be using this web recording down the line. You can refer back to it as well as share it with folks who you think it would be valuable for. And at the end, you'll be prompted to complete a survey about the content and what you'd like to see more of in our webinar series. It's less than 10 questions. I think it's 7 questions. So if you have a second to just fill it out, we really appreciate your feedback. So today, as I mentioned before, I'm Biz Gormley. I'm Director of Operations and Member Services at EPIP, and I'm joined with Emily Kessler, who is now a Senior Advisor here with EPIP, but has held many roles and been a leader here for a while. Today's agenda, quickly, I'm going to go over the agenda, and then I have a question for all of you, because we'd love to get your voices integrated into the conversation, even if we're not able to hear them all live. So just giving you a look ahead at what's going to be happening on the call. We're going to discuss the call for sessions. You may have seen it in your emails or checked out more details online. We're going to talk a little bit more about the content, how it came to be, and the vision for the conference. And then we're going to dig into what makes for a successful application, talk a little bit about how they're going to be reviewed as well. and then highlight ideas for session and workshop design that will allow you to think about, both for the EPIP conference, but also in general, how to really create a proposal that reflects the depth of your ideas and allows you to start to think about how to connect with your audience as well. We'll end with a Q&A to hopefully answer any of the questions you have, and start a bit of a discussion if there are questions that come up a lot. And then we're, of course, available after the webinar to answer specific questions. I just want to set the tone. Today is one definitely about trying to be helpful, as well as encourage people to think about submitting sessions. But before we get too far down the line, I would love if you guys can type into your question box 1 or 2 words that come to mind for you right now on the topic of submitting for the EPIP conference. So if you were asked right now the 1 or 2 words that really describe how you are feeling about the prospect of submitting in response to the call for sessions, what are those words? You could just go ahead and type those into the question box. We're curious how you guys are feeling right now.
Or even what words come to mind about presenting at the conference. If you've never had a public speaking engagement, but you're really curious and you want to learn more, you know, what words come to mind when you think about speaking at the conference? We'd love to hear from all of you. And we're not satisfied with a 1% participation rate. So everyone, please, just 1 or 2 words. Don't be shy. We're not going to read these out loud or necessarily attribute them to anyone in particular, but we really do want to know what you're thinking right now, where you're starting from. All right, so we have about a 50% participation rate. Hopefully, as you're listening to our webinar today, if other words come to mind, please share them, and also questions, please share them too. Thanks, Biz.
One other thing is, we can get into this a little bit more down the line, but in terms of, as I said before, setting the tone for the talk today, we hope you'll ask questions, definitely, and we hope this will be useful, but I also want it to not feel like the only opportunity to talk to us about this. If you are either new to EPIP and want to learn more about what is this thing and how do your ideas maybe stick to the wall in our community, I would love to talk to you about that. If you are feeling worried or daunted, but you do have a seed of an idea that you'd like us to help you grow, definitely feel willing on your side to reach out, because this is not a grading proposal. This is a chance to develop ideas together. So this year's conference is in Baltimore, as you know. The theme is Elevate Ourselves, Our Work, and Our World. And over the course of 2 days, we are going to be holding a variety of workshops, plenaries, and sessions. Leading up to this point, we've been working on really thinking high level about how to bring some of the most prescient and important questions in the field to the forefront right now. And we have tried to create tracks to basically serve as themes for the content of the conference, both the plenaries and the workshop sessions that members and EPIP community will hopefully be submitting. We focused on 3 tracks. These tracks were designed in connection with our planning committee. So our planning committee is a committee of EPIP members who have stepped forward to be part of helping put together the conference this year. And in collaboration with them, we've come up with 3 core conference tracks. And what I'm going to do now is talk to you a little bit about each of the tracks and examples of the types of questions that come up under these headlines. And I'm going to ask that if you have a chance, you take a peek at the conference tracks link that's on the slide, as well as at the bottom of that slide, you'll see the call for sessions document that really goes into detail about the ideas. So those are two resources I hope you'll point to. But for today's session, I'm going to just do the headlines first. The first is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Philanthropy, Accomplishments and Unfinished Business. This is really designed to help equip participants with a deeper knowledge of the state of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, as it's sometimes shortened to, in philanthropy, as well as the actionable strategies that everyone can use and advocate for within institutions and the broader field. So this is a chance for people on all levels of organizations to reflect on either what you're doing, what you've seen work in other organizations, what might work, what might not work. It's a chance to be honest and also productive and inspiring in thinking about how we can push this conversation forward. Types of questions that may be considered underneath this track are definitely not limited to, but include: how is philanthropy's practice of DEI evolving, and where does it need to progress further? In what ways is the field more supportive of emerging practitioners or next gen than it was when EPIP was founded 15 years ago? So looking back historically over the last 15 years, how has the field changed in terms of the way it treats practitioners of color, LGBTQ practitioners, people of all different identity groups? What specific practices are institutions using to advance these goals, or how can EPIP members and their allies support and or advocate for these practices within and outside their institutions? The second conference track is Place, Power, Politics, and Philanthropy, Learnings from Baltimore and Beyond. So this track wins the alliteration prize in terms of the way it was drafted, but I'm excited about it because we are in Baltimore for the conference this year, very intentionally chosen, both for its historic relevance and also kind of current role in pushing forward really important movements and change on all different levels. So it's a chance to honor the depth of the history and context of Baltimore, but also look at place-based grant making and place-based work across the country. So the objectives here are really to learn from philanthropy's history of investment in place-based work with an emphasis on Baltimore, engage local and community leaders in dialogue around equitable community change and philanthropic community partnerships, and explore how philanthropy can support emerging movements for equity that have both place-based components and different forms of infrastructure. Questions that we've started to popcorn underneath this topic, again, definitely not limited to, but things to consider. How is place-based work evolving, and what can Baltimore's history of funding or lack of funding teach us? What does it look like to fund movements for equity like Black Lives Matter? How can philanthropy better partner with community and movement leaders to advance real change? And how can or should philanthropy be helping to challenge and or reframe narratives about communities of color? How can energy and innovations from other sectors be brought to bear in support of equity? So it's a chance to look at the lens of place to explore a whole variety of questions. You know, one thing that comes up for me as I'm reading and reflecting on the text is, even if you feel like the headline fits, but you're feeling a little bit of discord with any of the questions that come up, I think that's a great chance to dig in with us. If you want to talk about ways that this headline brings up ideas for you in terms of conversations that need to happen, or people that you think should be given time and space to share their work or their voice that isn't already coming up in the questions, definitely please put those forward. Excited to hear thoughts outside of what we've already started to brainstorm for sure. And then just going back to track 3, Leadership for Equity in the 21st Century. So this, this track is a chance to look at kind of the bigger picture of where we are in the trajectory and history of philanthropy and what we can do to redefine leadership or equity and or equity in this century. So the goals are really to push the participants and EPIP members to reflect on and define each of your or their personal leadership stances. So who am I as a leader? no matter where you may stand in the sector, in your work, in the timeline of your career, in the hierarchy of your organization. To explore a set of traditional and non-traditional skills and approaches that can make EPIP members more effective as leaders within and outside institutions. So some of those hard and soft skills that are essential to pushing the work forward. It's a chance to challenge the notions of what political involvement means for people working in and around philanthropy. So, this year is obviously a time when electoral politics are high on everybody's minds, but beyond just the traditional sense of what political involvement means, how far can we go? And to help EPIP members and participants at the conference develop skills to move them or their next stage of leadership forward. So how can we look at the developments in the field? How can we look across sectors? How can we look at both personal and community development to think about developing new kinds of leadership and new kinds of effectiveness? Questions to consider under this are: how are constructs for social change leadership evolving? What is being demanded of the leaders of today and tomorrow? What does it take to advance equity, an equity lens within one's own organization? How can EPIP members lead toward an equity lens from wherever they are? How can EPIP members set themselves up for success in their institutions and in the broader field? How should EPIP members think about their leadership trajectory at a time when traditional notions of upward mobility are less reliable? What quote-unquote timeless knowledge, skills, and approaches are relevant to EPIP members across their work as effective agents of change? And how is philanthropy's relationship with politics evolving? How does it need to evolve? For me, this also is a chance to think about data and technology and the future of workplaces in general. It's a chance to take a step back and think about philanthropy in the context of the larger equity or racial justice or social justice frames. It's a chance to think about that in the context of all of these bigger trends in society and think about how we can either develop skills or have really important conversations about what it'll look to lead in the coming world. So we're going to get in a little bit more into format options going forward, and I think session selection criteria a little bit going forward, but I think we wanted to pause here just because that's a lot of content, a lot of information, and see if there are clarifying or topical questions that we can help answer right now.
Yeah, so if anyone has any specific questions about the tracks that Biz just mentioned, please type them into your question box now. We will continue on with more information, but wanted to pause here.
Great. So again, as people are writing in questions or before we switch over to the next pieces of the presentation, definitely want to ask you to check out the website. A lot of the content I just talked about is on the website in the conference sessions and in the conference tracks. Please read it, and please reach out with questions or new ideas or ways that you want to push the envelope. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
So thank you. There's one question about how long sessions last, and all the sessions are 90 minutes long. And and in case anybody else is wondering, there is room for 8 possible sessions at the conference as of now. All right, so I'm going to move on, and I'm going to talk about the application. So the application is live, and it's a SurveyMonkey application. The deadline is May 22nd at 11:59 Pacific time. That's a Sunday. I highly, highly, highly encourage everyone, if you are thinking of applying, that you download a preview of the application first. So if you go to the application at SurveyMonkey, you will see on the very front page, there's a link to download a preview of the application. So please do that, because there are some essay questions and it will be helpful for you to see what they are and compose your answers in advance. So please go ahead and do that. Make sure you download that preview beforehand. And again, as Biz mentioned, there is also a very detailed explanation regarding the call for sessions and what each of the tracks means. So that's on the EPIP website. So please check that out as well. So, but before I move to the next slide, I just want to take a minute to talk a little bit about what EPIP is looking for in terms of a session. And so to begin with, sessions can really be in any of the following formats. They could be hands-on workshops where you would be offering some skill development, or they could be a presentation of a case study. You could also design a session to be a panel discussion. But what EPIP is really looking for is some type of participant engagement in your session. We're really focusing on some sort of interactivity. We find that the interactive piece increases engagement, and it also increases learning on both sides. We also would like for these sessions to really speak to the needs of EPIP members. And so I'm going to share this demographic slide right now with you all. And so many of you on this webinar today are EPIP members, and we're really excited about that. But if you're on this webinar and you don't know who an EPIP member is, this will give you a little snapshot. So right now, EPIP has more than 1,200 members, which is really fantastic. And they are mostly Gen X or Gen Y. We have members across 35 states. More than half of our members are women. Nearly half of our members identify as people of color. They work at private and public foundations, but also at government agencies, in corporate giving, and in many other roles throughout the nonprofit sector. And so a lot of our members can be entry-level jobs in philanthropy, but they can also be experienced professionals who are committed to staying involved with EPIP because they feel very passionately about working on social justice philanthropy. And so when you're thinking about who might be in the audience so that you can design a session that really speaks to the user perspective, please keep this information in mind. Also, folks come to the EPIP conference for a variety of different reasons. They could be coming because because of a need to expand their own personal growth as a practitioner. They may be coming to seek greater knowledge about the sector. They could be coming to practice or develop new skills. But almost all of them are coming to the conference to network and meet other people, meet like-minded peers. And so those are other factors that are really important to consider when you're designing your session. And so what does it mean to fit within a track? So I'm just going to back up 2 slides to go back to the tracks that Biz mentioned. So as Biz discussed, there are a lot of questions that come up for us under each one of these tracks. And so as you heard, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you could possibly present for the conference. And so I would encourage you to look at these topics through a variety of different lenses, perhaps through the individual lens or an organizational lens, or even through the lens of a system or the field at large. And consider whether your topic might be best suited for an entry-level practitioner, or maybe a more experienced practitioner, or maybe for all of the above. And then you're probably also wondering, how does EPIP review and rate these applications? Well, we have a committee made up of volunteers, of EPIP members, who are working on planning the conference with Biz and with Tamir. And so this committee will be reviewing all the applications and making recommendations to EPIP staff.
I just want to interject for 1 second on that. Tamir was sorry to not be able to join this webinar today. He's on a plane, but he did want me to share in terms of the process that it's possible that you will submit an idea that we love and are excited about, but we want to learn more about. So there may be a dialogue. We may go back and forth and draft together. There may be a similar submission to yours or a topically interesting combination between yours and another session submission that we may reach out to you and talk to you about how to collaborate. So there may be a bit of back and forth. It's not like the application just goes off into the computer and you come back with a yes or a no. There's definitely some gray space for us to build together. So if you have an idea and you've, especially this early in the process, if you have an idea that you'd like some help fleshing out, or if you want to just get started with your application and see how it falls and where we go from there, I do just want to flag that there is going to be most likely a bit of conversation on the topics.
Thanks, Biz. Also, in keeping within what's happened in past EPIP conferences, we, depending upon the location of the conference, we have had anywhere between 150 to 300 total participants at the conference. And so these sessions could have attendees anywhere between 5 to 40 people, depending upon the topic and what else is going on in other rooms at the same time. So it's you could plan on a variety of different people in the room. So I'm going to stop for 1 second to see if there are any other questions, and then I'm going to take you through a process that I go through when I'm designing a session or a presentation or a workshop. So when I'm designing a session, I go through these 4 different steps. And what I'm going to do is share an example with you now. When I recently facilitated a workshop for the EPIP New York chapter, and it was a women's empowerment workshop. And so I think that by sharing this example with you and how I went through these 4 steps, it will help you to see the process that I go through in designing a session. So when I'm first invited to deliver or facilitate a session, I start off by drafting or defining what the goals or the purpose of the session are. So in the case of the Women's Empowerment Workshop, we had 4 different purposes or goals. And the first one was we wanted to challenge assumptions about leadership. Number 2, we wanted to discuss alternative models of leadership. Number 3, we wanted to develop a personal awareness of leadership style. And also, finally, we wanted the participants to engage with each other. And what we know from past information is that folks show up to these workshops because they want to develop skills, but really they want to meet other people in the field. And so we wanted to maximize that, right? And so those were the goals for our workshop. The second thing you want to think about in designing your session is what important talking points do you need to get across? So for this particular workshop, because it was really interactive and the content was really coming from people in the room, I didn't have specific talking points. I was really improvising throughout the workshop. But you might have some very important talking points you need to get across, so make sure you jot those down. And then the third piece you want to think about are your key design principles. So I will give you an example of what a design principle could be. So for our workshop, we really wanted to maximize participant engagement and minimize the presentation. I feel that a lot of times with these workshops, the people in the room are the content experts, and I'm looking to unearth information and for us to reflect upon and share it with each other. And so that was another key principle. I wanted to stimulate discussion and generate independent thought, and I wanted to moderate the presentation of the ideas that were coming up. And so after I determine my goals and my talking points and these key design principles, only then was I able to really pick or design an interactive activity that would help promote the goals, considering the design principles that I wanted to achieve. And so I realized that the best way to do all of this was to create small group discussions, because that would allow for people to meet each other and for me to include them in the content generation. And so I came up with a list of discussion questions and had the room break out into small different groups. Each group discussed these questions, and then at the end of the session, we did a larger group debrief where we talked about some of the bigger findings that we unearthed. And then we wrapped it up from there. And so those are the steps that I go through when I'm designing a workshop. And I'm happy to share with you any other, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at this point. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward and give you a couple of ideas on how to maximize participant engagement. So this website that's listed at the bottom of this page, unconference.net/methods, is a really fantastic website, and they offer a number of different methodologies that you can use to maximize participant engagement in your sessions. I'm going to go over 4 of them because I've used all 4 of these recently and happy to describe what they are. But I really encourage you, if anything I say piques your interest, I encourage you to go to these websites and do the research, because these are really fun ways to maximize participant engagement. So the first methodology I want to mention is open space technology, which was created by Harrison Owen many decades ago. And it's really used, it's one of the best ways to run a meeting of any size. So I've seen open space technology used for group meetings of over 1,000 people. It's really quite amazing. And this is one way to run a session when you don't have a formal agenda, but when you really want to know what questions or subjects your participants care the most about to explore. And so, without getting into too much detail about how it works, this is really a way for the participants to come up with the content and the questions. And it's very, very interactive. So if that's something that you're looking to do, I highly recommend that you go to this website and investigate it more. And I'm happy to discuss some of these one-on-one with any of you when you're figuring out how to integrate this into what you want to present at the conference. The second methodology, which I think could be really effective at an EPIP conference session, is something called World Cafe, and that was developed by Juanita Brown, and she's still using it today. And this one's really fun because it can be done in small groups and small rooms, so it fits within the EPIP conference. And what happens is the room is set up it's divided up into small tables, and each table has tables that could fit between 4 to 6 people, and the tables have, instead of a tablecloth at a cafe, they have a large piece of paper on it with markers. And there's a host at the table, and a conversation happens between the host and the other participants, where the host asks the participants a specific question and unearths some of the answers from the participants and writes down their findings on the tablecloth. And then after the 20 minutes is up, all the participants move, or they switch to other tables, and then the same conversation or the same question is posed, but to a new set of people. And so it's a really interesting way to discuss some critical issues where you want to really capture the knowledge in the room. And so the Unconference website describes it as, they say, tables are set in a small cafe, a conversation is put forward, attendees spend 20 minutes at a table, and the host is chosen to stay behind and summarize the conversation to the next group that comes to sit at the table. And it's really used to explore issues that matter to the group. And then the third item that I have mentioned here on our slideshow is this concept called strategic questioning, which kind of goes hand in hand with World Cafe. It's a methodology also developed by Juanita Brown of World Cafe, and it's a way to ask very deep and powerful questions that are thought-provoking and promote learning and discovery. And so it can work hand in hand with a World Cafe setup where you discuss very exploratory questions to promote learning and discovery. And then finally, the last methodology I'm mentioning here is something called Fishbowl, which some of you may have seen in past EPIP conferences. And this is a way to, so fish bowls are really kind of interesting. They're really helpful if you want to observe group behavior or group discussion. So what happens is that a small circle of people are situated in a room. It could be, I guess, anywhere between three to five people. They're having a conversation in a small group in the room, and then there's a larger circle around them, and those are the observers. Those are the rest of the participants in the room, and the observers are really watching the conversation that's happening in the center circle. And as I said, this is really helpful in observing a social situation or a group discussion or group behavior where the folks in the smaller circle are discussing something and the folks in the larger circle are observing, and then everybody sort of comes together afterwards and shares what they've seen. And so those are some of the interesting ways in which you can really increase participant engagement in your session. So I'm going to stop there in case there are any questions coming up.
I'm going to say briefly that when you look at the call for sessions, you'll see some of these resources on there, but also a few bullet points on selection criteria that involve things like having explicit equity focus, having diversity of speakers, etc. If you're going to do a fishbowl, obviously there isn't inherently a core set of speakers. So if you feel like some of these things are conflicting, definitely just think about what you would like to have happen, and then we can talk about ways to bring the core values to the front if you're struggling with that, because we're excited to hear how you want to bring some of the most important questions to the forefront through different styles, but also please don't feel restricted by any of the criteria at this point.
Thanks, Biz. So on this last slide, we just want to include all of the links that you might need in order to move forward. The link for the conference tracks, call for sessions, the application preview, and the deadline, don't forget, is May 22nd at 11:59 p.m. I just want to say that I've presented at the EPIP conference myself years ago. I presented, actually moderated a panel discussion at the 2013 conference in Chicago, and I'm almost always nervous before I give any presentation or any type of public speaking engagement, and um, and that's just going to always be normal for me. But I really do enjoy doing it, and so even though it might seem a little nerve-wracking to you to move forward with something like this, if you have something to say and you have something to share with the membership and you really think it's going to be of value to them, I really encourage you to submit a session. And many times I know we're not always given the opportunity to speak publicly in our workplaces or work towards these stretch goals. But EPIP is a great place for you to do that. And if you are really proud of your submission and if it's not accepted, I would say don't lose heart, because many times EPIP has turned some of these sessions into webinars, or in the past we've developed them into local chapter events. So there's if you really do want to find a way to practice your speaking skills, I'm sure we can find a way to do that. So I would encourage you all to think about what you might want to share with the EPIP membership, and Biz is here to help you develop it further. Tamir is here to help you. I'm here to help you, and let's see if we can get your session moving along. So before we break, I wanted to once more ask if there are any final questions, and then and also if we were to ask you now what words come to mind when you think about either submitting a session or presenting a session at the EPIP conference, have you had a change in terms of the words you would choose now? What words come to mind now? Or does it seem more achievable now that you've heard us talk more about what goes into presenting at the EPIP conference? So thanks everybody for your feedback. Yeah, there's lots of opportunity to develop a session within these tracks, and so I highly encourage exploring what's important to you and what makes sense to you. I'll before we completely close out here, I'll share something. I'll share a little bit of a quote with you. I'm not going to get the quote perfect, but I recently saw Susan Cain speak with Eileen Fisher in person about Susan Cain. For those of you who don't know, wrote a book called Quiet, and it's about introverts in a world that can't stop talking. And Susan Cain's TED Talk about introverts has logged over 3 million hits the last time I checked. And she's an introvert who now has a public speaking career. And when she first started speaking publicly, she was absolutely terrified. But when I went to hear her speak last week, and she said that she's not so afraid anymore, or she overcomes her anxieties when she knows she has to speak in service to an idea that's really important to her. So, talking about introverts is really important to her. It's her passion, it's her calling. And she can overcome her anxieties when she is invited to come and speak in service to her passion. So if you have a passion, or even if you have a curiosity that you really feel strongly about expressing, I believe that you can overcome any kind of obstacle or insecurity or anxiety that you might have about presenting. And so I would encourage you to think strongly about what it is that you want to share with the world. And we look forward to reading your sessions, your applications.
Thank you all for making time. Please definitely share this with colleagues or friends who are thinking about it as well. And we're excited to see your ideas.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Biz.
Thank you, Emily.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.